The plane ascended gracefully into the clouds, the gentle hum of the engines lulling the cabin into a state of subdued anticipation. It was a typical Thursday afternoon flight from New York to Los Angeles, but for Joseph and Maddie, two complete strangers seated next to each other in the cramped economy class, it was about to become anything but ordinary. Maddie, a vibrant young artist with a penchant for adventure, had just scored a last-minute ticket to the City of Angels for an exhibition she hadn't been able to resist. She was a whirlwind of energy, her eyes sparkling with excitement behind her oversized sunglasses. Joseph, a seasoned businessman, was on his way back home from a particularly dreary conference, craving a bit of excitement to break the monotony of his routine. Their first encounter was a mere coincidence as they both reached for the same in-flight magazine. "Ah, I guess we both had the same idea of in-flight entertainment," Maddie giggled, her hand brushing against his. "It seems so," Joseph replied, his smile never reaching his eyes, which remained hidden behind his own, more practical reading glasses. But as he glanced at her, something stirred within him, a curiosity that had been dormant for too long. Their conversation began with the usual pleasantries, the weather, their destinations, and the dreadfulness of airline food. But as the hours ticked by and the drinks began to flow, the banter grew flirtatious. Maddie's laughter was like a siren's call, drawing Joseph in despite his better judgment. "So, Joseph, what's a guy like you doing on a flight like this?" Maddie asked coyly, her leg brushing against his under the seat. "Just flying high and trying to keep things interesting, Maddie," he said, raising an eyebrow. The double entendre hung in the air, thick with suggestion. The flight attendant walked by, casting them a knowing smile. "Can I offer you two anything else?" "How about a little bit of privacy?" Maddie whispered, her eyes twinkling with mischief. The attendant winked. "I'll see what I can do." As the lights dimmed and the cabin settled into a nap-inducing hum, Joseph took a deep breath. He had never been one for spontaneous encounters, but something about Maddie's carefree spirit called to him. "Maddie, I have a confession to make," he began. "Oh?" she purred, leaning in closer. "I've always wanted to join the Mile High Club," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Maddie's eyes widened in surprise, and she let out a gasp. "Me too," she whispered back, a blush coloring her cheeks. Their glances grew more lingering, the air around them charged with a newfound electricity. The idea of joining the Mile High Club with a complete stranger was both thrilling and terrifying, but the more they talked, the less absurd it seemed. "I've got to admit, I've had my fair share of flights, but I've never quite had the nerve to do it," Joseph said, his hand resting on the armrest between them. "Well, what are we waiting for?" Maddie challenged, her voice a seductive purr. They exchanged a knowing smile, the unspoken agreement passing between them like a secret handshake. The plot had thickened, and the comedic thriller of their shared adventure was about to unfold. They waited for the opportune moment, their hearts racing like the engines outside. When the bathroom light flickered off, signaling that it was vacant, they made their move. Joseph stood first, his knees bumping against the seat in front of him as he tried to maintain a casual air. Maddie followed closely, her hips swaying as she walked down the narrow aisle. Once inside the cramped space, they wasted no time. The flirtation of the last few hours had turned into a dance of desire, their bodies fitting together like puzzle pieces. "Are you sure about this?" Joseph murmured, his hand on the small of her back, pushing her closer to him. "Oh, I've never been surer of anything in my life," Maddie breathed, her hands sliding up his chest. Their kiss was a collision of passion and excitement, their lips meeting with an urgency that seemed to defy the confines of the tiny space. The sound of the plane's engines muted the soft moans and whispers that filled the small bathroom as they explored each other's bodies with a feverish intensity. Maddie's fingers danced over the buttons of Joseph's shirt, revealing a chest that was surprisingly firm for a man who spent his days behind a desk. He returned the favor, unzipping her dress to reveal the lacy lingerie hidden beneath. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. "Thank you," she replied, her voice low and sultry. "But right now I just want to be adventurous with you." Their flirty banter had evolved into a playful game of seduction, each trying to outdo the other with their daringness. As they kissed and touched, the lines between reality and fantasy began to blur. "You know, I've always wondered what it would be like to do it in a place like this," Maddie whispered, her hand sliding down to the waistband of his pants. "I can assure you, it's nothing like your wildest dreams," Joseph said with a smirk, his hands finding the hem of her dress. "But I'm more than happy to help make your fantasy a reality." Their bodies pressed together, the cold metal of the bathroom walls a stark contrast to the heat emanating from their skin. They managed to squeeze onto the small sink, Maddie straddling Joseph as they kissed fervently. The danger of getting caught only added to the excitement, making every touch, every kiss feel like a stolen moment of pure, unbridled passion. Maddie's dress was pushed up around her waist, revealing her lace panties. Joseph's hands roamed over her thighs, tracing the lines of her tattoos. "Your ink is incredible," he murmured, his fingers lightly brushing the intricate designs. "Thank you," she replied breathlessly. "It's part of who I am. Every line tells a story, every color a secret." "And what's the story behind these?" he asked, his thumbs grazing the edge of her underwear. "It's a map to my heart," she said with a mischievous smile, leaning in to nibble on his earlobe. Their laughter turned into moans as Joseph's hand slipped under the fabric, finding her wet and ready. They kissed harder, their tongues mimicking the rhythm of his fingers. Maddie's hands fumbled with Joseph's belt, eager to feel him. He groaned as she finally managed to free him, her hand wrapping around his length. "You're so hard for me," she whispered, her voice filled with amazement. "Only for you, Maddie," he replied, his voice strained with desire. Their movements grew more urgent, the sound of their heavy breathing and the occasional bump against the door, the only noises in the otherwise silent bathroom. They were lost in a world of their own, floating above the clouds in a cocoon of passion. Maddie's panties were drenched, and Joseph's pants were a testament to his own need. They kissed as if it was the last time they'd ever get the chance, their bodies moving in sync despite the awkward space. "I need you inside me," she murmured, her voice a sweet siren's call that he couldn't resist. "Here? Now?" he asked, his eyes dark with lust. "Yes, now," she said firmly. "Let's make this flight unforgettable." With one swift movement, Joseph lifted Maddie onto the sink, her legs wrapped around his waist. She gasped as he pushed inside her, filling her completely. They moved together, the sound of their hushed cries and the throb of the engines the only music to their lovemaking. Their bodies moved in a silent symphony of desire, the thrill of the forbidden making every touch feel like a declaration of their newfound connection. The turbulence outside only served to enhance the intensity of their union, as if the plane itself was egging them on. "Oh, Joseph," Maddie moaned, her nails digging into his shoulders. "Maddie, he began, unable to find the words. "I know," she said, cutting him off. "This is insane, but I don't want it to end." Their climax was swift and intense, their orgasms crashing into one another like waves on a stormy shore. They clung to each other, their breathing ragged and their hearts pounding in their chests. As they pulled away, their eyes met in the mirror. The reflection showed a man and a woman, strangers turned lovers, forever changed by the sky-high escapade they had just shared. They laughed, the tension broken by the sheer absurdity of their situation. "Well, we can certainly check that off our bucket lists," Joseph said, adjusting his clothes. "I'd say we did it in style," Maddie replied, smoothing her hair back into place. They left the bathroom hand in hand, returning to their seats with knowing smiles. The rest of the flight passed in a blur of whispers and stolen glances, the thrill of their mile-high adventure. The rest of the flight passed in a blur of whispers and stolen glances, the thrill of their mile-high adventure lingering in the air like the scent of their combined desire. The chemistry between them was palpable, and even as they tried to act nonchalant, the occasional brush of their fingers against each other's leg or the accidental graze of their knees sent shockwaves through their bodies. As they approached their final destination, the conversation grew more playful. "So, Joseph, tell me," Maddie began, her voice a soft purr, "what's the wildest thing you've ever done in a boardroom?" He chuckled, his eyes glinting with a hint of mischief. "I've had my fair share of interesting business meetings, but I think what we just did takes the cake." "Oh, you underestimate yourself," she teased, her hand resting lightly on his thigh. "I'm sure you've closed some pretty intense deals in there." "Maybe," he allowed, his hand covering hers and giving it a gentle squeeze, "but none quite as memorable as this." Their flirty banter was interrupted by the fasten seatbelt sign. As the plane descended, the gravity of their situation began to set in. They had shared an intimate experience that most people only dreamed of, but now they were returning to reality. "What happens now?" Maddie asked, her voice a little softer than before. "Do we just go our separate ways?" "Well, we could," Joseph said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Or we could make this the start of something more. After all, we've already got one thing in common." Maddie looked at him, her eyes searching his. "What's that?" "We both know how to make a trip to LA interesting," he replied with a grin. The plane touched down, and as they gathered their belongings, the tension in the air was thick with unspoken promises. They exchanged numbers, the digits a silent agreement to explore the possibilities that lay ahead. As they walked off the plane, hand in hand, the world outside seemed brighter, more vibrant than before. The thrill of their clandestine affair still pulsed through their veins, a shared secret that only added to the excitement of the adventure they had just begun. In the bustling airport, they parted ways with a lingering kiss, the taste of each other still fresh on their lips. "See you soon, Maddie," Joseph murmured against her mouth. "Count on it," she whispered back, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Their story didn't end there, not with the way their hearts raced and their bodies craved for more. It was just the first chapter in a wild ride that would take them to new heights, both literally and figuratively, and as they disappeared into the crowded terminal, the only thing that was certain was that their next encounter would be anything but a routine trip.